Well, hello there, and welcome to yet another riveting episode of My Dog Will Eat My Face. I wanted to touch on one thing in particular today. I absolutely have no idea how long this will take, so just bear with me as I touch upon this subject. Now, in the past, I know I touched on the point of being removed professionally can be very disjointing to a person, especially a man. I'm not trying to be targeted to only males or females per se, but it happens more often to men. I'm just basing this on psychological statistics. And trust me, women, you got enough issues on your side. Let the men have one. That's a major psychological issue on their side. I'm kidding, of course. We don't need any psychological issues, but this usually affects men a lot more than women, but it can happen to both. And again, that's if you're removed from a job, you lose your identity. That happens a lot with a lot of different people, men especially, but also to women. It can happen to anyone at any age, but also it can really happen later in life. Uh, say middle age and older. Because when you're 18 and getting canned from your job at the pizza place, you're not really losing your identity, are you? I was so attached to the pepperoni supreme. Oh, I thought of that in the conference call. No, that doesn't usually happen. Later in life, though, if you're leading projects, if you're in some sort of leadership role, especially and tasked with certain things, you get attached to it. You really do. And to have it ripped from you violently, seemingly, is incredibly traumatic. At the time it happens, and for a long time after it happens, because that was a part of who you were. If you had that career, that was part of who you thought you were, of how you identified yourself. Good at any cocktail party or reception, easily going back to the 80s. I think in the 90s it started to fall out of fashion, but when you first meet someone, one of the first things you ask is, so what is it you do to get to know somebody? Of course, that still happens today. I see it a little bit less these days, actually a lot less these days, but I remember that was pretty much par for the course for a very long time for society and when you meet new people. Because what do you do was actually a way of exploring that other individual. It was a way of saying, who are you? And when you look at it from that perspective, you realize how important that identity is and how awful it can be for you to suddenly lose it for whatever reason. And I've talked about this previously with my own experience. When I was put into hospice, I was coming off the heels of a 20 plus year career in what I used to do. And it was it was a large part of my life, but it was an enormous part of my identity. And I could no longer hold on to that, at least not like how I used to. I felt like part of me was missing. And yes, a lot of that obviously was caused by the worsening physical ailments that I've been having. And those are through no fault of my own. That's, I guess, comforting. It's not because I was embezzling money or, doing weird things at the office, coming to the work naked on the back of a donkey and playing a ukulele and microwaving old fish meals for lunch every day and leaving it to fester in the break room all day. I mean, nothing weird, you know? I can say I didn't do anything as I cling to the fact that my body was just giving out. But that wouldn't be the whole story because I think that my last employer, the very last company I worked for, brought somebody in to specifically get rid of me and replace me. And in the last few, I don't know, months of my employment, it was an extraordinarily hostile work environment. And this supervisor of mine just came on as my supervisor, brand new. And we did not see eye to eye on things. And it still really bothers me the way this individual handled things at that time. And I want to talk about why and how I have come to a roundabout conclusion that my lamentation of not working is actually even deeper than before. It's not even just identity. It actually also shows symptoms of narcissistic trauma. And I really want to talk about that today because I think this affects a lot of people in the workplace. And I have not yet gotten over that trauma in the final days of my career. Even though they were immediately followed by hospice care, and again, that's not my fault. Even with that fact cognitively known, that the toxicity of the last few months of this supervisor who visited great vexation upon me on a daily basis actually caused ongoing trauma that I still deal with. And that's a bit of a bummer because when you're fighting for your life, when you're facing the end game, you still can get hurt. All the other regular means that anyone else could be hurt with, excuse me. You can still get sick, you can still be cheated on, you can still be erroneously fired, you can still be in an accident. Life still goes on with no mercy whatsoever to the fact that you are a terminal stage of a disease. Because the universe and most people simply don't care. And I don't think I'm going to come to any sort of closure about those final days of my career until I try to talk about it. And that is something I want to talk about today. So, this could be something that has affected you as a listener. It will affect you, or maybe it's happening right now. I've got to get beyond this emotional state of where I am at because obnoxious to me personally. So I am hoping that through the course of this podcast, I can at least take some additional steps forward to get beyond that. Wow, I'm still alive here. So, excuse me, I'm dealing with chronic hoarseness. That's one of the conditions I have to deal with now as I'm losing blood flow to my thorax because my heart is so weak. So, if it sounds like I've been screaming and yelling at a hockey game last night, it's because, well, I was. But that aside, I also have this lack of blood flow to the thorax. which causes intermittent and pretty chronic hoarseness. Some days I could hardly speak at all. So this is me on a good day. Anyway, so I apologize for that before I move forward. I had to slip that under the door really quick. But moving on. When I was in the workplace in the closing days, I had felt that I had done a very good job in what I was supposed to do. Now, I was fighting my illness, which obviously was a pain in my butt and the employer's butt. They don't want me in the hospital not able to do my job, and neither did I want to be in the hospital unable to do my job. So we were, as I saw it, on the same side. Well, they brought on a new woman on the East Coast. Well, the headquarters of where I worked is in Chicago. They brought in some woman, my boss, who I'm going to call, so I don't get sued for defilement or something bizarre. Let's call her Dana. I'm just making a name up, okay? Dana. Her name's Dana. And I was told one happy sunny day, hey, you are no longer going to report to Sally over there in Chicago. You're going to report to Dana all the way on the East Coast. Well, that's odd, especially since this Dana individual just canned a brand new employee that she hired and fired this person just a couple months after bringing her on. I sort of saw it as a sign that I was being moved there to be cut, to be dismissed from my position. Probably because I was fighting my disease so much. But I approached it open-mindedly as best as I could, and I would say the first couple months, Dana was very friendly, very complimentary, and very nice and welcoming. There was in that moment, I thought, wow, I might have really misinterpreted this. Maybe it's just a transfer of supervision. And that last person she just canned after bringing them in for only a couple months really was just bad at what they did. Maybe it's all good. But then I was told by Dana that they're going to hire another position in my exact role to support the exact business unit that I support. I didn't ask for help. I performed my job duties alone, so to speak. There didn't need to be two of me in the exact same role, is what I'm saying. And I read the writing on the wall immediately that they're looking to hire my replacement and they want that in motion before they dismiss me. That's what's happening with this person. That's Dana's plan. The whole thing beforehand was a gimmick. It was all a lie to get to me to show her basically under the hood of all of our legal operations. And she moved on to the next stage of trying to hire someone else to replace me. And I knew it. I knew it immediately. So I thought to myself, well, I can stonewall this whole thing and fight it, go to HR, make it utterly miserable for her, and then leave just grumpy and cranky and mad and replaced by a complete idiot. Or I can suggest the job to someone who I know, who is very knowledgeable and skilled in that same area that I am, who I count as a friend of mine, and I could actually offer up a decent paying position to. So I could actually recommend someone I know and like for the job. And then my employer would be able to take them on very rapidly. And I'd also help this other individual out with their life, maybe. I thought about it. And I came to the conclusion that stonewalling the decision was pointless. The decision was already made. The best thing I could do now was at least try to have some benefit to someone I liked and cared for. So I could at least do that. One last act of kindness to someone I care about at my own detriment. So that's what I picked. Needless today, this other individual met with me and met with Dana and was hired right away and brought up to speed to get trained on the same stuff I do. Played out exactly like I expected. And since then, I've questioned many times if I made the right decision. Should I have made it as miserable as possible for them? I waver sometimes. But I think at the end of the day, I did the right thing in that at least I made someone else's life hopefully better, or at least with more options. I hope they don't resent me. But I don't know, because they've not talked to me at all since my entry into hospice. So this friend of mine has fallen off the face of the earth. So I really don't know how they take it. Now, after that hire, however, I do think I was far too much of a pushover. And that is the part, I think, where I made some wise decisions and I might have screwed some things up. But also, that's when I really started to learn that Dana was a raging narcissist. And so that's what I wish to discuss next. So, after it came to the point of me bringing this friend of mine up to speed with how this business unit operated, it was my understanding that I was still in good graces, so to speak, with the business unit itself. But my new supervisor, Dana, made it an absolutely toxic work environment for me. For example, I negotiated budget money from an entirely different department to pay for me and this other individual in the legal group to go to DC for some conference work and on site continuing education training that we need for various certifications and what we do. And I got it paid for by an entirely different department. I ended up in the hospital, though, again, fighting this heart issue, and came back to find I was taken off the trip that I myself had organized and got the funding for. My supervisor, Dana, just took me off and did not even have the gall to tell me. I found out third party by a person when I was trying to change my hotel booking. So I talked to my boss over the phone and confronted her on it. And she said something like, "Oh, yeah, I thought it'd be best for you to be there by your doctors in case something happened." And I was thinking to myself, don't you think that should be something that I should decide, not you? Or at least something you should talk to me about before making a decision? It was a huge, glaring red flag. Then I saw her meeting with other people and excluding me specifically. So, for example, she'd fly out to our office and fly in one of our attorneys and meet with the new person who I brought in, our legal litigation support team, and the executives, and not me. I'd be the only one not there. It's like I was purposefully uninvited. And the list goes on and on. I mean, she would berate me in conferences with the rest of our team and say the most ridiculous things with the rest of the team present. For example, one time we were discussing about an issue with clients being able to do XYZ with one of our solutions, and They shouldn't be doing that. And I said, well, under section 14.1a, Romanet 3, they shouldn't be able to do that in the end user agreement. So we should be protected under that. And she told me to shut up, basically, right there and then. It's like, no, no, no. We don't interpret the agreement. The attorneys do it. And I said, well, yeah, Dana, but I can effing read, can't I? It was not pretty, but it was ridiculous. Calling me out in a meeting about something that I've known about and supported this business unit with for 6 years now at this point in time, and acting like I shouldn't even say it. When she found out that I went to a customer's location to help them design a new solution and make it compliant and legally acceptable from the outset, she thought that was entirely inappropriate. If she had known that's what I was going out there to do, she would have not allowed it. And in my career in doing what I do, that's something I've done in other companies, major companies, global companies, repeatedly. Meeting with customers was never a big deal for me. And all the onboarding and training that I had before this supervisor was being an on-site business partner, to be integrated with the business, to help them build their business and not be a roadblock. And she came at it from basically a completely different perspective, gave mine no entertainment whatsoever, even though I've been doing this longer than she had. And then she even wrote up my annual review and gave me the one and only bad annual review I've ever had in my entire life. Whereas if you looked at my review for my previous supervisor, I was praised for doing the exact same thing. And I don't understand to this day how she was able to do an annual review when I was only reporting to her for 2 to 3 months at that point. Like, what expectations of yours did I not meet? She didn't care to specify. Also, talked about my medical issues to other people in the company and complained about. And that is so unprofessional, so toxic. I don't know why to this day I did not march down to HR and report on this and say, you have created a dramatically hostile work environment. I can't work with this person, period. And to this day, though, I regret that I never did. I actually retained hard copies of this maltreatment. But after I stopped working, I took no action because then I was going in through my body's issues. And the statute of limitations to take action had run out, and basically shot myself in the foot with that. So anyway, long story short, Dana was a raging narcissist. She would lie. She would belittle me in front of teammates. She would say that I was incapable of doing things that I've been doing for 20 years. She would pass judgment on me without knowing any of the details whatsoever. She wouldn't even tell me about her decisions and would exclude me from communications purposefully. And she talked about my medical condition to other people who had no business knowing what my medical issues were. And of course, she framed it as a way of saying, oh, well, I care about you. I just want to make sure you're next to your doctors. And I'm like, give me a break. I'm an adult male. Don't you think you should talk to me about those concerns? So she was a raging narcissist, as I already said now 3 times. And then, lo and behold, I got sick with some heart issue when I got out of the hospital. Was planning to return to work after a very short-term disability. It was like a month. unfortunately, but it was just a month. But then, lucky me, I got sick again with septic shock. I had a septic infection. I went into the ER with a 106 fever. I was in delirium. The hospital would called my parents to come visit me in the hospital, saying you might want to come see him, because I would come too, and I'd see my mom and my dad standing above me. I'm like, oh, what are you guys doing here? When you go into septic shock, it's only got a 50% mortality rate. You got a 50-50 chance of living. So it's quite serious. Obviously, I didn't die, and I was anxious to get back to the workplace. I was stopped, though, by getting calls from who told me that my position had been eliminated. There's no position for me to go back to. I had exhausted my FMLA when I was in the hospital with septic shock, and for that reason, they eliminated my position. And there it was. Now, I don't know if I could have gone back to my position in the state I was in. But that's, to me, is besides the point. This is something that they could have worked with me on. This is something they could have developed with open doors and open eyes, and not with deception, flat out lies, grossly hostile and inappropriate behavior. That was not necessary. So that still haunts me to this day. Years later. Obviously now I can't turn back to work because I'm in worse case than I was then. I'm in much worse shape. There's no way. But how Dana handled things was absolutely horrific. And I came to the realization that I need to get over that. I need to somehow get over that treatment and those last few months of working. Otherwise, it's just going to keep nagging at me. And I also found, just through coincidence, I would say, through my reading and me filling in the time, that there is such a thing now, or not now, there's always been such a thing as narcissistic trauma. It's mainly used by psychologists when they talk about people leaving a narcissistic relationship. But it also can apply to people who deal with it in other forms, such as the workplace. And as I went through symptoms of that might indicate that kind of trauma, it was really eye-opening. So, some of the symptoms of narcissistic trauma include, but are not limited to, things such as more or less becoming a homebody, developing in some cases agoraphobia, a fear of crowded places, a lack of willingness to go outside and meet new people or do new things. A person develops a cocoon, a safe place around themselves to protect themselves from others. And they do it really through ice. Now, I could blame my disease 100% for my isolation, but deep in my heart, I know that's not the case. Because when I learned of narcissistic trauma and its symptoms, it was a great epiphany to me that I am exhibiting those exact traits. And in my mind, they're terrible traits to have. Build a safe place like a cocoon around yourself subconsciously can really wall you off from a lot of opportunity, friendships, experiences, memories, things that are extremely important. And they're still important to me today. Yes, I am in a terminal end stage right now, but that doesn't mean I want to spend the last days of my life in a cocoon that I built around myself. That means I have to take some responsibility for where I am today and break through that. How do I do that? I obviously cannot change the past. I cannot change Dana. I can sit around and seethe with anger and vengeance on her, perhaps, but that would quickly go nowhere. Well, I mean, what would I do? Send a nasty email? I mean, give me a break, you know? It's a waste of my time and energy of what's left for me. Honestly, if I was going to live to 89 years old, it's still a waste of my time. But I gotta have a sense of self responsibility in understanding that I built that cocoon around myself. At least with respect to this and this trauma. And I have got to somehow distinguish it from the real physical issues that isolate me, because those are real and I can't change that, versus the cocoon that I myself have built and prevents me from living as much life as I can live with whatever life I may have left. So I will need to really babysit myself to some extent to make sure if I'm not going out, if I am afraid of doing something, is it because of my physical issues? Is this my cocoon that I will really have to get into the why I don't want to do X, Y, and Z? Why am I blocking certain things from happening in my life? Is it because, yeah, I can't go to 15,000 feet, maybe, which might be part of it? I don't know. I just pulled that out of nowhere. Or is it because of that previous trauma? A great example would be I can understand me not going out to the bars or something to meet people. It's not like that's a great place to go for that anyway, but I understand not going to certain lengths to hang out with people or traveling far, which of course I did love to do. And that's unfortunate, but that is absolutely a physical limitation. But just in the building in which I live and in the area in which I live, they have all kinds of social hours, happy hours, street festivals. I wake up like every other weekend to the sound of live music blaring outside my bedroom window. And I look and, oh yeah, there's a whole street fair outside. There is no lack of me being able to reach out to others, but I am terrified of doing. I wasn't that terrified before. I am now. I am not sure how to overcome that other than just do it and set myself up for something small, maybe. I can't approach this and say, I am going to be the most popular person in my neighborhood by the end of this year. That's a insane goal and I'll fail, right? I need to set a small, achievable goal that I know I can achieve. And maybe through that, as those opportunities come up, just saying hi to someone. Even I see people almost every day. I live in a very highly populated building and area. Just saying hi and talking to people, that might be just golly, a really lame first step. I feel like I did that when I was 5. That's probably the only short achievable goal that I can start with today and then move on from there. Otherwise, I won't ever achieve anything. Now, I have poked around quite a bit, trying to determine how a person overcomes narcissistic trauma. And I haven't found anything, which is really not helpful. maybe I'm looking in the wrong places. And you know what? Maybe that's the first thing I should. Because since I am in hospice care, I do have resources too, like social workers and counselors and whatnot. At the very minimum, I should be able to bounce this off them and see what their thoughts are. They're the professionals. Why am I asking a non professional like myself? Of course, I have no idea. I don't know how to build a rocket either. But I think no, that's a good idea. I've talked myself into it on this podcast. I am going to reach out to my resources that I have, and I need to socialize this with them and get their advice on how best break down this cocoon that I've built. So at least I have an answer. I have a baby step forward to do. Now, of course, they're all closed on the weekend. A 3-day weekend. Happy Labor Day, by the way. And they're all not going to be around. Huh? But anyway, when they're back in the office, I'll peen this off them. Or at least reach out to them even immediately after this podcast and say I want to talk to them. Just so that it holds me to it. They'll call me and they say, "You wanted to talk?" And then that starts the conversation. It's not reliant upon my lack of hesitation come Tuesday, for example. So I actually now feel better about that. That's a baby step forward, I should ask. I did not expect me to feel better about this whatsoever, and I actually feel better about it. I have a baby step forward to do. That is so cool. I actually feel really good about that. I can do that. I can ask people I already know. They're the professionals. I can sit down with them and get their ideas. I know I can do that. And that's a hell of a lot better than doing nothing. And just because I might be dying, well, I am dying. And just because I'm in a terminal state, it doesn't mean I have to hold up walls against myself. As the Roman Virgil, the poet, once said, "A brave man may fall, but he may not yield. Just because it's my last day doesn't mean there are not days that I live, and I can still do things on those days." Well, my friends and good listeners, patient listeners, I should say, thank you for sticking with me during this little dilemma. I really knew that this was something I had to address. It's something I've been struggling with now for a long time. The first problem was I didn't even understand what my problem was. But I think with that better understanding of what the origin of this trauma is, and the behavior that it facilitates is taking that step in the opposite direction will at least be a step taken. I may not succeed fully overcoming it in the days I have left, but that doesn't mean I'm not going to try. And I think that's where I'll leave things for this week's podcast. But I want to thank all of you for listening in and giving me a voice to extrapolate these thoughts and these ideas. I have actually come from this issue feeling a lot better than when I went in. I gotta tell you, folks, if any of you are out there dealing with serious issues, medical, uh, mental, well, I mean, you can't have one without the other. obviously. If you're out there dealing with anything, even if you're out there and your life's perfect, I don't care, forget that. I highly recommend journaling. This is my venue for journaling. And I did that here originally because I wanted my thoughts in my voice to be available to my family and loved ones when I am dead. You don't have to do the same thing I do. You could journal, you can paint, you can produce music, you can sketch. Have a venue somewhere to express these thoughts and emotions. Journaling is the most basic thing. I've known about it for decades, and probably only the last decade and a half I've been a true believer, or not even a half. Last decade, maybe that long, I've been a true fan of it because it worked so well for me. Not just in this venue, but also handwritten journaling. That's how I started. So I encourage all of you out there, if you're dealing with anything, or taking that time to have introspection will pay off way more than probably anything else you could have done. Try to deal with those issues. If you want to support the podcast, you can find the homepage on Spotify and click on support this podcast. Or if you want to be a real class act, you can go to patreon.com/mydogwilleatmyface and become a member there. Through there, you can direct message me, and I do respond. I'm not a jerk. I'm actually a nice guy. I hope. My dog likes me, but Hitler had a dog. Anyway, I drove off way off the reservation there. You can direct message me. There's pictures on there about me, my life, and interaction. So if you want to support the podcast, you get a little more bang for your buck that way, I guess, all I'm saying. But you've already made my day just by listening to this podcast and giving me your ears for this time. I do thank you from the bottom of my. I hope to continue to speak to you again in the near future, but it is ciao for now.